Heyo everybody, Haku here with my read-through for the rest, part 2 of Magical Girl Raising Project Ormao Shoujo Isekai Haku Limited Chapter 3. We've only got like 9 pages left, but this is going to be a special video as well, because after we get through these 9 pages, I've taken a bunch of notes because I want to talk about, you know how I did sort of a death predictions? I don't know if I made them separate videos or not, but I did death predictions for, and I kind of updated them every once in a while, but I did them once we got introduced to the characters in Unmarked, and I did them once we got introduced to the characters in Restart. And now that we have met the final 4 characters in this chapter, I'm going to discuss my death predictions for all 16 characters or whatever. So yeah, this chapter is basically, first chapter introduced us to Toko and the 7 girls there. Second chapter introduced us to the investigation team, which is 5 girls, and then the remaining 4, this chapter is introducing them, and it's Pithy, who is getting broken out of prison by a former student, Tot Pop, and I friggin' love Tot Pop a lot already. Pithy's hilarious too, as always, with the hair pervert stuff. And 2 other girls they broke out, Sonia Bean, who is some sort of basically like feral cave girl taken in by Pukin, who is a powerful brute, and Pukin, who is a member of nobility from the 1800s, essentially. A member of nobility from the 1800s who is both a magical girl and I don't know if murderer is the proper term. She has probably murdered people. I mean, she killed those 2 girls without real good reason earlier this chapter, but she was more like, she was using her position as head of the examination division to be a crooked judge, essentially. Like almost like what a crooked Supreme Court judge or something would be. Essentially, she was committing crimes, blaming other girls for the crimes, and doing a whole bunch of sketchy stuff, it would seem. And lots of official bribing, too. So yeah, she was just a big corrupt official that got sealed away, and Sonia Bean is sort of just her servant brute, it would seem. But either way, let's keep reading. At least that's the impression I got so far. So yeah, let's keep reading. Alright, we are at page 21 at where the scene break is. It was difficult to explain Pithy Frederica's magical skill with just a few words. First, she needed someone's hair. It was necessary to have a head of hair with a length that she could wrap around her fingers. Only head hair works, so she couldn't use any hair, sorry, dirty thoughts, from any other part of the body. Then she had to wrap the strand around her fingers. Damn it, this is Magical Seal all over again, beginning of the video, and I already can't stop laughing. She had to wrap the strand around her fingers, and once it's fully wrapped, the target will be displayed on her crystal ball. Even if they're floating in space 10 million light years away, even if they're trapped in some cyber world, even if they're adventuring off in some other dimension, even if they're starting life in another parallel world, Frederica's... Are we going to get into parallel worlds later where all these characters are still alive? Because I've brought up and thought about things like that before, that we don't know if somebody's magical skill is just going to have the ability to bring people back to life. Because, I mean, Keek's magical skill was just a step away from that. She can create that alternate digital world, and she can bring people back to life in the alternate digital world. So her ability's kind of a small step away from that, and Keek's maybe not even one of the most powerful magical girls out there. But either way, continuing on, Frederica's crystal ball will show their current state. However, only if they're alive. Dead people won't be projected. When Frederica was active, that's what she used to use her magical skill for. She worked on her skill of collecting the hair of people that she passed through. Sometimes she'd sneak up on an unsuspecting person's house, search for any hair that fell on the floor of carpets. She used the hair that she got, using it to find her colleagues' weaknesses. Looking at the circumstances of those above and under them, peeping in on discussions between important people, spying on the daily lives of cute girls. She was Frederica. She was able to use her magical skill freely. Furthermore, Frederica's magical skill wasn't just for remote viewing. By putting her own hand into her crystal ball, she could physically manipulate whatever's reflected on it, and anything inserted by Frederica into the crystal ball will be as if it was floating in the air. She could grab tiny things, pinch things, hold things, hit things, punch things, basically anything that her hand's capable of doing. She would put her hand through the crystal ball, grab whatever's in the location. After that, she'd return it through her crystal ball, and she'd be able to bring things to her side. The size of an object she brought could be bigger than the size of her crystal ball, as long as Frederica could carry it in her hand. No matter how heavy or large the object was, she could pull it through the crystal ball. The laws of physics didn't apply to her magical skill. Neither distance, space, worlds, nor dimensions mattered. And vice versa, whatever's projected on the crystal ball, if she were to send an object through her side, she can deliver it to that projected side. Okay. Now, the Reformists want to use Frederica for that purpose. They wanted her to transport personnel across the crystal ball, bypassing the barrier that prevented them from entering. Ah, smart. They could come and go as they please. Since Frederica would be able to transport them in and out, the barrier would become a useful tool instead of an obstacle. The reason the barrier was created was to prevent escape. It's the same as locking birds in a cage. Their goal was to capture the assassin within the 24-hour time limit. If they were birds in a cage, then Pukin and Sonia were like vipers. Even if the investigation team gets in the way of their combat, you need an army to surpass those two. It's been 30 minutes since Top Pops left the room. Frederica was good at getting into someone else's pockets. Whatever she asked for, words, gestures, careers, and other things she grasped using her magical skill. She was able to eliminate any troubles and put herself in a good position. Being cheap, flattering them, cooperating, guiding them, tuning, taking full advantage of her enemies strategically. As Frederica's apprentice, Top Pop was also good at getting into someone else's pockets, but she couldn't copy any of Frederica's methods. Despite being her apprentice, the way she does it is something that Frederica's never taught her. Top Pop usually won't hold anything back, sometimes making people irritated, though as long as they were entertained it was fine, as her way of life exceeded normal levels. Even if she was considered an enemy by someone's parents or best friends, all she needs is just some time together to entertain them and they'd love her instantly. Terrorists, murderers, hair fetishists, stalkers, anime magical girls, death game test administrators, all she needs is some time to talk with them, and she'll make good with them and end the conversation with rock on, alright? She didn't have to lie like Frederica. She genuinely wanted real friendship with them, and her partner would usually respond in kind. As a stubborn person, like a porcupine with quills, she neither avoided the needles nor did she pull them out. Even if the needles would pierce her, she would take measures so that it would affect neither of them. Knowing this characteristic of Top Pop, Frederica sent her to Pukin and Sonia Bean. I realized they claimed that I forged my accusations. I shan't lie on that account. I did forge those accusations. However, everything I've done, every forgery has been in the name of justice. How so? You see, from years of experience as a torturer, I have learned the invaluable skill of reading people. I know whether someone will bring chaos to the world or if they'll bring peace. Whoa, sounds awesome. So now we see Top Pop letting Pukin just talk about herself and how great she is to get on her side. Though, having skills as a torturer wouldn't make you able to read people better, because if there's something that science has taught us throughout history, it's that torture doesn't actually get you information very well. Torture is actually a pretty shit method, because with torture, usually if you get information from people, it's a lie. Well, okay, this is going to be kind of off topic, but it's a reason that in movies and TV shows and stuff, torture works maybe more well than it realistically ever does in reality. And even then in TV and movies it usually doesn't work. But I feel like reality, too many people see it in TV and movies and think that it actually works. But no, with torture, you usually don't get information and you possibly kill or hurt your source too much for them to be able to give you the information anyway. And if you do get information, it's usually a lie. Like, even if you're pressed and we're like, we need to know this in 10 minutes, they're just going to lie to you for 10 minutes, and you're going to keep them alive for at least those 10 minutes and chase after their lies. So it essentially never ever works. And even, like, I want to say, even if it does work, I mean, you're still giving up your humanity torturing somebody, but that aside, like, it literally just doesn't work 99.9% of the time. So this again might be the author not knowing that much about it, or it could be, and it's probably purposeful, I would think, because she's so confident in herself. Like, look at me, I know people because I was a torturer. I know justice because I made those false accusations. So it's kind of more of Pukin. She reminds me a lot of Joaquin from Tower of God so much. The way she's just so into herself and stuff. Even if they have yet to commit any sins today, if they were able to fall to villainy later, then it's the responsibility of a lawbringer to cull them. That was what I've done, yet still the ones I saved dare to create reports that I slaughtered innocent citizens. And again, see, that's the thing. She killed people, not because they committed any crime, but because they might in the future. So, and she doesn't know if they actually would in the future, because all people are just human. Even magical girls are pretty human or whatever. So, again, I love this, that she's saying these innocent things, but she completely thinks she was on the side of, or she's saying these horrible things, but she completely thinks she was on the side of good and justice. Seriously, that's quite uncalled for. And that's what remained in history. My name tarnished as that of a cruel villain. That's horrible, those ungrateful people. I would be able to endure it if they only tarnished my name. However, they had the gall to drag poor Sonia's name under the mud as well. What? But Shogun, you're such a nice person. Not to mention a good superior. No wonder she follows you around. She's loyal to you and would risk her life for you. Top Pop may have already forgotten that her own subordinates were killed not long ago. Against her current opponent, Top Pop was listening as seriously as possible. Frederica removed her ear from the door. She's eavesdropping in. It seems like her apprentice had successfully entertained her guest. I absolutely love this. I love the way that it just makes Pukin seem so ineffectual. Well, not ineffectual, but like, I find her character hilarious. I find Pukin hilarious. The way she's this horrible, crazy, powerful, big, bad, evil, magical girl from history, but at the same time, she can't even tell that that Top Pop and Pithy are just like, oh wow, yeah, that's right, and just like playing along, letting them talk about themselves and how great they are. Pukin is great. If we're traveling abroad, I want to travel on these aeroplanes, said Pukin. There wasn't any time for that, so Frederica had to refuse her carefully. One of Top Pop's collaborators had already obtained a lock of hair from a resident of B City. Without this lock of hair, there was no way for them to get past the barrier. I love, too, that Pukin is from the 1800s. She wrapped the hair on her finger. She pushed Top Pop inside of her crystal ball. After that, Sonia, then Pukin. Finally, Frederica pushed... How is it possible to push something in with your own hand? And this must mean that she can just form the crystal ball wherever, I would assume, since that or she was locked away with it, but I think she can probably just form it wherever. That makes sense. After that, Sonia Pukin finally she pushed herself in while also grabbing her crystal. So she could... They said the rules of physics don't work, but she can pull her crystal ball inside of her crystal ball. That seems pretty crazy. Once more ignoring the laws of physics, of course. And finally, the Revolutionary Special Forces, Pukin named it, managed to sneak into B City. Okay, so that means the four of them, not the entire, like, revolutionaries or whatever, that group they had with them. When Frederica entered B City, the owner of the hair she used was already half dead. I told him I'd kill him if he made a sound, yet he still tried to escape. Probably because you didn't speak Japanese and he didn't understand English. Well, tragic mistake on my part. I love Pukin so much. A slashed throat. An old gentleman was lying face down on a table in a pool of blood. Frederica was lucky she got in when they did. If they'd killed the owner of her hair, then she wouldn't be able to use her magical skill. She was sure they'd heard her explain that before. Pukin and Sonia, they'd kill people without any hesitation. God, I freaking love Pukin so much. Oh my god. She's one of the funniest characters, I think, that I've seen so far from all three light novels so far. They safely entered the barrier. From here, they had to find their target on foot. But then, Pukin said, I am not going to walk around on foot. She decided to find a car. Originally, cars weren't a bad vehicle to drive around in. The countryside at this time of day... in the countryside at this time of day, there wasn't a lot of traffic. It'd be easy to move 4 people around without anyone noticing. The problem was finding a car that Pukin would be convinced to ride in. It was already late, and this road wasn't too popular. It'd take quite some time before a car would pass by, but contrary to what they expected, a car that matched Pukin's taste happened to pass by, at an alarming speed. Pukin ordered Sonia to chase after it. Sonia began running parallel with the car. From outside, she opened the car door and stretched her hand into the car, and soon the driver's head was missing. The car lost control and crashed into a utility pole. She had crashed the target car. Pukin scolded her. Tears began to flow from Sonia's eyes, and she looked pitiful. So Top Pop offered her assistance. The bumper's a little dented, but it's usable, see? Compared to cars in Japan, the American cars are way more sturdy. Wait, I thought B-City was in Japan. Maybe it was just an American car. Either way. The car was a newly polished Plymouth Fury. However, the front was dented due to the accident. Its color was vivid red. The driver's suit looked something like he bought at a mass retailer store. Its size didn't actually match him. Probably a new salaryman. Why he had a car like this will remain a mystery that no one will ever know. Ah, I've seen this car in a movie before, right? I've always wanted to ride it since then. Oh, that movie, right? The one where the car comes to life and kills people. Yes, that was the one. How did Pukin, who had been in prison for 130 years, know about a movie that was released after her time? Well, that's because she performed tasks every now and then, when she would be temporarily released from prison. Ah. Too bad the car... So I thought she hadn't seen anything for 130 years. Too bad the car's a bit different from that movie. A shame, but we'll compromise. Oh, by the way, that movie was based on a novel, you know. Oh, I'd like to read that novel. There's an English version, I'd assume. Top Pop got on the passenger... I love Top Pop just, like, completely playing / befriending Pukin. It's great. Top Pop got on the passenger seat. Pukin and Sonia sat on the back seat. Frederica entered the driver's seat. Sonia quickly removed the clothing off the corpse. At the same time, she placed them on the trunk. When Pukin saw it, she shook her head. Sonia, how many times did I tell you this? You're not allowed to loot anything. Keep them with the body. But it's a good suit. Come now, you're not going to starve just because you don't have any clothes. Japan is filled with delicious cuisine, sushi and tempura. They're all delicious, so be patient. Sonia seemed to look at the dead body disappointingly. She stroked every part of the corpse, and the corpse turned into a blackened ash. The blackened ash didn't maintain its shape. Although there was no wind, it collapsed, leaving nothing remaining afterward. So it would seem her magical skill is just destruction, because she destroyed the head of the corpse, and now she destroyed the rest of the body, but she didn't want to destroy the clothes because it would be a waste. So I guess that's her magical skill. Oh, of course, that's was Sonia Bean's magical skill. Maybe I should just read ahead. This was Sonia Bean's magical skill, to disintegrate anything she touches. Any living thing, any inanimate object, no matter what it is, it wouldn't have any energy to sustain itself. This was the magical skill that allowed Pukin to grow, and one of the many reasons why the Land of Magic chose to bring her down. Sonia got into the back seat. Since Pukin had some sukiyaki at hand, she was comforted. Wow, what a hungry spirit she's got, exclaimed Top Pop. Frederica didn't know where Top Pop's own high spirits came from. Was she the only person among these four with common sense? A tender joy began to... None of them have common sense. Like, it seems like Sonia Bean is just kind of... I don't want to call her a psychopath. I don't know if that's right, but she'll basically just do anything that Pukin says. And she's pretty weird. Pukin herself is just completely narcissistic. Like, the absolute epitome of it. Top Pop is, like, way too chill for all of this. And Pithy Frederica's a hair pervert. And so I feel like she's thinking to herself that she is the voice of reason, but if a nice set of hair came along, you know, she would lose that reason pretty quickly. Her own high spirits came from, was she the only person among the four with common sense? A tender joy began to spread within Frederica's heart. Frederica loved insane magical girls. She wondered if her apprentices were doing well right now. B-City was fairly large. The barrier covered most of it. She'd better not drive close to the city limits. They couldn't afford to make mistakes and touch the barrier. If they touched the barrier with a car, only the car would pass through the barrier, while the other magical girls inside would be caught by the barrier and slam into it. It wasn't hard to imagine the miserable fate that awaited them then. And now another scene break. Let me grab a sip of water. And with this scene break, we are at page 27. Frederica drove across the national highway surrounded by rice fields for around 15 minutes. Afterward, Pukin continued her idle gossip while Sonia was fiddling with the smartphone of the car's previous owner that she had found. Frederica found a sushi chain restaurant on the side and parked the car. Huh? We're going to eat again. Didn't we just eat before? Sushi goes to a different stomach. Come, Sonia. Yay! Pukin elegantly dived underneath the sushi place's entrance curtains. Sonia followed along nervously. Frederica simply smiled. I hope you don't mind if we join you two. Man, I know we're not exactly here for this, but to hell with it. Tot's hungry for some tuna. Compared to the modern magical girls, the energy consumption of old magical girls was worse. They needed food supplements. Furthermore, Pukin had already made Sonia hungry earlier, and Sonia immediately ordered sushi and tempura. If she got what she wanted, it would reduce her stress. Oh, this is sushi, isn't it? They're carried around by conveyor belts. I've heard of the power of the Industrial Revolution, but to think they'd applied it to even sushi. What awe-inspiring civilization. Calm yourself, Sonia. The sushi won't run away. Ah, it is running away. Well, let us feast with haste. Freaking love Pukin so much. Sonia stopped and flattened the sushi with extreme momentum, and while Sonia was cleaning up any dirty food bits, Pukin was securing a bite for herself, and Top Pop was cheering on both of them. Even though they stand out with their appearances, even their actions were attracting attention. The clerks and customers were all watching, some of them whispering. Some of them were asking for permission to take pictures. Frederica allowed all of that. Smartphones were pointed at them as she smirked for the camera. When she was an active magical girl, according to the Land of Magic, she should act so that humans won't discover her identity. However, right now, she's just another outlaw. She can do whatever she wanted while she was transformed. It's different if there are disadvantages to doing so, but there's no penalty for doing more things than necessary. Sonia turned to one of the smartphones being held by a middle-aged man. With sushi in her cheeks, she smiled and made a peace sign. Oh, so cute. While Top Pop signed her signature on a colored paper provided by the clerk. Frederica soaked a green tea bag in hot water, breathing out twice and moistening her mouth. Japanese tea and revolving sushi. It was familiar to her tongue. Even if it's cheap, it made her feel calm. The teacup was decorated with fish and kanji, satisfying her. Covered with fish and kanji, satisfying her. Returning to her home country gave her a feeling of nostalgia. Pukin and Sonia, during their long imprisonment period, have been released several times to do the Land of Magic's dirty work. The only reason the Land of Magic even bothered sealing these dangerous magical girls is because they'll be useful later. Nothing more, nothing less. Mages use spells and tools, sacrifices and skills, countless amounts of magic. With that amount of variation, it could be said that they're all-purpose. However, there were lots of prerequisites and restrictions for using those spells. They'd often either need a catalyst or just more time to increase their power. Either way, they have to spend unnecessary costs for them. Meanwhile, magical girls could use only one specific magical skill. In most cases, they're very powerful, and can be used immediately. They had an unlimited supply of uses. Compared to mages, their bodies were far more superior and have excellent physical abilities. That's why the Land of Magic utilizes magical girls. Frederica dug up her memories. She's uncovered a number of secrets owned by others who studied magic. Okay. Whenever Pukin and Sonia were temporarily released from imprisonment, the authorities were always cautious. The two of them were completely controlled, and they had countless countermeasures. In addition to simply monitoring them, they had tripled the number of safety devices. They loaded their intercom with a bomb, or brainwashed them using magic, or kept the other one as hostage. Or they would inject them with magical poison that would work even against magical girls, with the antidote only given if they complete the job, and various other things. Pukin must have been furious all the time. Even Frederica's experienced it. While she herself was sealed, causing her mind to blur, she continued to struggle. Despite being a prisoner, it would have lasted forever. She would be given shackles, then whenever a job's done, she'll be sent back to prison. There was no reason to not have any complaints. Now, Pukin was moving freely without a single restraint. This is not something she's doing to prevent a world crisis. In fact, there are already victims. Without any safety devices, the Land of Magic is asked to break those two out. Without any safety devices, the Land of Magic is asked to break those two out. There would be no reason for that. Outside of her speculations about the Land of Magic right now, Frederica was convinced that she's acting completely out of their calculations. She took another sip of her green tea. It seems the cheap taste was going to be a habit of hers. Hey, Frederica. Yes, Shogun Pukin? The dishes aren't coming around. Would you like to order directly to the chef? I'll translate for you. You are quite competent. Once the mission ends, you can be one of my retainers. Frederica has Top Pop's hair. A while ago, she collected Pukin and Sonia's hair. She also got some of Top Pop's subordinates' hair as she passed through them in the crowd. For Frederica's magical skill, hair is essential. Her options increased the more hair she had. As her abilities spread, it can lead to Frederica's own strength increasing. For the time being, she'd like to collect more hair. Even if her collection was gone, she thought that she should redo her collection as before. For that, it was necessary to have true freedom. To obtain freedom, she had to make sure this job was successful. Frederica opened a piece of paper and took out a strand of hair. Looking at it through the light of the sushi restaurant, this hair belonged to the most beautiful girl of Top Pop's subordinates. It was only about 30 centimeters, but its bright golden color reminded her of rice fields in autumn. Frederica smiled at its beauty and sipped on her green tea again. Okay, so hold on. Bright golden color. Snow White had blonde hair, so is this Snow White's hair then? Or is this another girl's? Who do we know that has blonde hair at the moment? Does anybody from this? Hold on, let me have my notes down here. Do any of them have blonde hair? Nanako-san had blonde and pink hair, didn't she? And I think that's about it. So yeah, unless it's Nanako-san, then I think that might be Snow White's hair. Or even... Oh wait, it's one of her... belonged to Top Pop's most beautiful subordinates. Okay. So this is interesting. I'm not sure why this is being brought up again, but... Does this have to do with the girl in the gas mask that was brought up earlier? That had the, Unless why... It's one Top Pop's subordinates, not one of her students. That's why I was thinking Snow White at first. So was it the girl with the gas mask who they mentioned earlier with a lot of detail? And I was like, why are they mentioning her with detail if Sonia is the poodle girl? So, interesting. Alright. I'm not sure what the significance of that is quite yet. But either way, that was a really good chapter, getting introduced to those 4 characters. It was hilarious. It was so good. I'm gonna save the video really quick and then continue on with the discussion part. Sorry about that awkward jump cut. I was just starting, I had saved the video and I was going to start recording my discussion, and I made it like 3 minutes in, and then all my stuff started, my battery started dying. So I had to go plug it in for about an hour and a half. And yeah, now I'm gonna tack this discussion onto the end of that video. I wanted to do my death predictions like I did for previous arcs. I don't remember if I brought that up in the recording that I still have that didn't get lost because my battery was dying. But yeah, I did something similar to this. I don't think I did it in a separate video. I might have done that for Unmarked, but it was kind of like death predictions, and I did this for Junie Tyson as well, and I think for both Junie Tyson and Restart, I don't remember, but I think I maybe updated my guesses as we learned more as the series has gone along. But I did a death prediction when we learned who all the characters were in Restart and in Unmarked. So now that we've been introduced to these last 4 characters this chapter, I wanted to do this. I wanted to do this for Limited. So, and also after I do a discussion on my death predictions, I also took a few notes because I think a part that plays into me trying to predict this is that one thing I learned or I picked up, or just maybe I thought to myself, maybe there haven't been a lot of other people thinking this, when I read Restart, I thought a lot of the characters in Restart played a lot of the same roles in the story that characters in... there were 16 characters in each, but the characters in Unmarked did. And I'm sure there are even more connections and different ways that people can draw these parallels, more than what I'm just remembering, but I kind of took some notes. I wanted to discuss that a bit too, but I want to do the death predictions first. I was just saying that's kind of a discussion related to this, since it's kind of related to my ability to guess who will live or die. And the way I decided to do it was the way I decided my predictions for Junie Tyson, is I'm going to give my current percent chance to live or die for each of them. So let's start off with the group of characters we just met, and then move back to the characters that we met in Chapter 1 at the end. So starting off, I'll do Sonya Bean first. I'm going to give Sonya Bean, right now I think they have a 15% chance at life, 15% chance of making it out of this, 85% chance of death. And I think a lot of these are going to look similar to that. A lot of these are pretty bleak, because we only had 2 characters out of the 16 survive unmarked, and only 3 out of 16 survived restart. So I'm not expecting too many to live here. So for most of these, the odds of death for me are pretty high. So I'm guessing Sonya, 15% chance of death, 15% chance of life, 85% chance of death, because I think what's most likely for the character, and I'm kind of going to get into my own, booking my own predictions for how they might die or might live, and I think Sonya Bean will probably either Pukin's going to die, and because Pukin is Sonya Bean's master that kind of keeps her under control or whatever, she's just going to be enraged at the loss of her master, go out on some revenge campaign or on some rampage, and end up getting herself killed that way. Or I think that she could be killed, and that would send Pukin down the same path. But as for a chance to live, the only chance I see at her living, which is why it is so small, is a chance that it's not the smallest percentage up here, because it's a chance I could see this kind of happening, is if Sonya, for some reason or another, we don't know much about her character, but if she can somehow free herself from Pukin, and free herself from that fate, essentially. If she can somehow say, after Pukin dies, okay, well, I'm going to handle this not by going on a murderous rampage or a revenge spree, or rather, Pukin stays alive and Sonya Bean realizes somehow finally that, oh man, I'm on the wrong side of this. I think that could be the way that Sonya survives. It's a small chance, but it's an existing chance. Pukin, things are looking even worse. I say 90% chance of death and 10% chance of life. The death I see happening about the same way, but I can think of less ways for her to survive. Like the death I see either being the same as Sonya Bean. Either she dies to send Sonya Bean on that rampage or whatever, or Sonya Bean dies and that sends Pukin on this, because we see that Pukin, in the latter part of this chapter, we see that she cares about Sonya a good amount, if Sonya being held hostage and stuff was enough to keep her in line when she was released on jobs before. So I just see either that, like I was saying, Sonya dies and that sends Pukin out on a revenge mission or killing spree, and that would be how Pukin ends up getting taken down, because she sort of overstretches herself as a character, and the good guys finally end up taking her down. 10% chance to live, though, is if the author decides that she would be a good recurring big bad antagonist, but I don't really see that happening. It's not really likely, and if it was to happen, I'd say it's even more likely with maybe Rainbow or Pithy at this point, so I don't think that's likely for Pukin. I think Pukin's this big bad dominant enemy that's going to get taken down. Pukin in this case is probably going to play a role similar to Melville or Clamberry, I think, where they were this big strong fighter antagonist, but they get taken out and they're not even necessarily the last antagonist left. Whereas Swim Swim and Fav were left after Clamberry was taken down. Even though she's not a good person, it's hard to really call Clamberry an antagonist sometimes. And then almost the same with Melville in a bit of a way, but with Melville it was the same after she was taken down. Noko-chan, who's not necessarily a bad person but was certainly an antagonist, was still left. So that's sort of where I would put my guesses for Pukin at. 10% life, 90% chance of death. Top Pop, even worse. Top Pop is tied with 2 other characters at my lowest percent chance to survive. I'm going to give him 5% chance to survive and 95% chance of dying, because we don't know enough about him for me to say, oh, it's certain, but it's damn close to certain for me. The reason I say Top Pop is almost definitely going to die is because she's being played and used by Pithy, basically. Pithy is more of a big bad antagonist character, and while it would be cool to see Top Pop continue on as a revolutionary leader, I think she's going to die because her master got her into this mess. Though she kind of got Pithy into the mess, Pithy's the one with the real power here in that relationship. And in addition, I could see her dying leading to somebody like Pithy taking over the revolutionaries and turning them into this evil cause. She could use Top Pop as a martyr to go against Top Pop's own way of doing things. So, yeah, basically I think she's just being played by Pithy, and she's really the most likely to die, tied with two others. Pithy, though, is the opposite. She's one of the few that I think could realistically survive. I'm giving her a 70% chance of living and a 30% chance of dying. Because A, she seems like fans really like her, which makes me think that she already has kind of a big presence in the story, but that she's maybe going to have an even bigger presence. And I think out of all the characters here that could be recurring villains, if Malpam turns out to be a villain, which I could see because she's with the Foreign Affairs Division, or Rainbow turns out to be a big bad type villain, I could kind of see them too. But much more than them, I think Pithy is the most likely villain to be a recurring villain. I'm sorry to even really call them villains, but I think Pithy's the most likely there, which is why I give her a pretty good chance of survival, I would guess. Next up, I'll talk about the 5 girls on the investigation team, and I'll lump Hana. I forget what Hana's other name. Hana go to something that starts with a G. Go to Kuji Hana, something like that. I'll lump Hana and Mana together because I'd give each of them a 10% chance of living, 90% chance of dying. I think that they are, and to call them fodder seems rude. I think we're going to learn a lot more about them, but they're always good characters that are expendable, so to speak. We had characters like Nana, Weiss Winter Prison, Tama, Nemarine. I could even name at least 2 more. Who was I thinking a second ago? Lapicel, Top Speed. There are always these good characters that are on the side of good that just die somewhere along midway through the story because they have to fill in their deaths for this to be a death game or whatever. I see Mana and Hana both in that kind of role, and because they are specifically from the investigation division, I could totally see them dying so that it's people other than the investigation division, specifically Ripple, who is supposed to just be a student, to be able to be the one to capture the assassin. Because say Mana and Hana get taken down, Malpam is sketchy, maybe even Nanako-san's taken down. Ripple is supposed to be a student who's proving herself, being taught by Nanako-san to make sure she's not dangerous, and what better way to prove herself than being the one to capture the assassin? So I think that those 2 are probably going to die, and I think that Ripple's got a very good chance to live, but we'll get to her. Malpam is another one of the, I think there are a few that are close to 50-50 here. There are, let me count here. 1, 2, 3. There are 4 girls that are about close to 50-50, and because I can't decide, and about 1, 2, 3 there are 3 that I gave a better chance of living than dying, and the first was Pithy. The second, there's 4. There's 4 that I gave a better chance of living than dying. But this is the second after Pithy that I gave a better chance of living than dying. Malpam I gave 65% chance to live, 35% chance to die, because I can't tell this, at least right now, but I feel like she could potentially be a recurring, I don't want to call her a villain, but I think she could survive this arc and then go on to say how, our methods at the Foreign Affairs Division worked, and maybe the Foreign Affairs Division and maybe Malpam herself were really sketchy and manipulative, and they're evil behind the scenes. I could see that happening, and I could see Malpam just being a recurring, kind of on the bad side of things character, not outright evil villain, but on the bad side of things. Or maybe she turns out to be good or something. Either way, I feel like Malpam isn't in the same, because she's not just been presented as straight up good, straight up an investigator, because she has this mystery where she may be evil, maybe not. I think that gives her a lot more of a chance to survive than Hana or Mana, so I actually gave her a pretty big chance from what we've seen so far, because I think that mystery is something we're going to delve into more. And then there is the one that I genuinely could not tell. Nanako-san is the only one I gave an actual 50-50 for. 50% chance of life, 50% chance of death. I cannot tell it all, and there are a lot of reasons that go into this, because I think them killing her off this arc would be a good way to, since she's so important to the Land of Magic, it could be a good way to cripple the Land of Magic, do a big blow to them, where now in future arcs they need to find a way to do things now that Nanako-san is gone. But I also think that her living would be good, because what if she lives and she becomes good friends with Ripple, and then she starts helping out Ripple and Snow White, and she already has a connection. She starts helping Ripple and Snow White. She already has a connection to Flea, who has a connection, of course, to Shadowgale and Clantail by proxy, I guess. So that would start to build up a main character group of the survivors. Nanako-san living would be the bridge that bridges the gap between Ripple and Snow White and between the survivors of Restart. So I think that the loss could be good for building future arcs, and her surviving would be good for building future arcs. And there's even other ways this could happen, because she could end up dying and still serve the same purpose. She could end up dying but still make that connection between Flea and Ripple here, who would again bring in the survivors from their game that they know as well. Or she could end up dying, and we don't know if a magical girl dies if the item part of their magic stays around. Then again, I guess the item doesn't work on anybody else. It only works with her. Because I was going to say, what if she died and left her goggles behind to Flea or something, or to Ripple? But maybe not. Maybe they wouldn't work if she died. I don't really know. Honestly, we haven't had an example. I don't know how that works. So, yeah. That's a possibility, but I don't know how real it is. And then my greatest chance of survival, Ripple, 99% chance of survival, just 1% chance of death. I'm not really worried about Ripple. Ripple is definitely a recurring character. She survived unmarked along with Snow White, and Snow White's an important character for the future. I mean, I'm hoping and assuming. And I feel the same about Ripple. I just feel like Ripple's going to survive a lot further into the story. And when she dies, I think it's going to be a big thing way down the line, if she ever even dies, and I'm not convinced she ever will, because we saw all the growth. She was a character we focused on most in the light novels and Unmarked. We focused on her more than Snow White. She had a lot of growth that arc. We've seen her grow since then to where she is now, even though a lot of it was off screen, and I think she's going to grow even more now. I think Ripple is close to a protected protagonist when it comes to this story. I mean, she's not totally... I'm not saying it's impossible for them to kill her off, but I just don't see them doing it at all. So Ripple is the most assuredly living, in my opinion. And now we'll get to the 7 who were... 6 of them were just turned into magical girls, and one of them is a sketchy assassin. Allegedly, at least it would seem. I'll start off with Captain Grace. I think Captain Grace has a 20% chance of living, 80% chance of dying. I was going to say higher percent chance of dying, but she didn't die first, she didn't die early on in that first skirmish, so that makes me think a little bit more about things. I think that a way she could survive is that she learns her lesson when she sees other people dying about how she just wanted to go on this adventure and stuff. She learns her lesson about being more realistic about everything, and she decides to betray Toko and go against Toko, or go against whoever's evil in this situation. And if that's the case, then I could see maybe her surviving, but I think it's much more likely she'll die. And next up is Funny Trick, because I feel like the same thing. I feel like Grace could die, and that would make her learn the lesson of don't run into things, and it could drive her to survive, kind of like in the past other characters dying have led others to survive. Or I could see I could see her dying. I would give her the same score, 20% chance of survival, 80 of death, if I didn't already say that, and it's basically the same reasons. She could die very easily, and I think she probably will, but the way that she could survive, and it's reasonable, which is why I give it 20%, same as Captain Grace, is that she could learn that lesson about what it means to go on an adventure or whatever, and how dangerous it is, and she could turn on Toko because of it, or turn on whoever's evil, and I'd give her 20% chance of survival if that happens. So yeah, Captain Grace and Funny Trick about the same, but I could see them both dying in a similar situation to what the Lazaline and Detic Bell situation was, what the Atnyanyan and Yumina Psycho situation was, and the same, way back in Unmarked, the situation that was had with, I guess you could say the Peaky Angels, but that's kind of a stretch, but more directly with Weiss Winter Prison and Sister Nana, where all of them had that story of one of them gets killed off and it causes the other to go a little bit too far and get themselves killed. So I could see Captain Grace and Funny Trick having that problem where one of them dies and the other dies trying to avenge them or live up to their honor or something, or hell, even killing themselves like Nana did. Next up is the second of the three that's tied for my lowest chance of survival, and that would be May. I'm giving, I still don't know the full magical girl name, but I'm going to give May a 5% chance of life and 95% chance of death, because May is a very gimmicky character. She's the turtle turned into a magical girl. I could totally see them doing something where they're like, oh, the class turtle disappeared, who took it? Or, oh, the class turtle died. So I think May is a gimmicky enough character that I kind of see her in the same place that one of the early killed characters like Daisy or Masked Wonder were in Restart, or like maybe Tama's a little bit different, but I think Tama still works as an example. Maybe Ruler works as an example. Nemarine definitely works as an example. I think May is a character like that. I think May is very, very likely to die just because it's more of a gimmick character. Next up, Nozomi Himeno, which was one of the ones that I gave close to 50-50. I'm going to give her 40% chance of life and 60% chance of death. Now, the reason I put her chance of life is 40, which is kind of high, I guess, is that she was the first person's, at least I believe she was the first person's perspective we really got, and we stuck with her for a bit there. So she could be Limited's version of Ripple, where she's the first one we get the perspective of, and she grows a lot throughout the series. Or she could, and because we saw she had a lot of problems and a lot of insecurities when we did more than basically anybody else, when we, other than maybe Nanako-san, but other Nanako-san and maybe Poster Reed, when we saw her perspective, she had a lot of worries and doubts and all that, and she was like, struggling through life. So I get the feeling she could be Limited's Ripple, or she could be Limited's Petchka. She could have that growth and learn to overcome all these insecurities throughout the novel, and then get killed or sacrifice herself somewhere towards the end. So Nozomi Himeno, I don't know the magical girl name yet, I don't believe we've been told yet. I'd give a 40% chance of living, which is pretty kind of high. And now the third one, or wait, is it the fourth? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, this is the fourth one out of 4 that I gave a bigger chance of living than dying to, and that's Wedden. Wedden is on one of the covers of the light novels for Limited. Now that doesn't mean she's going to survive. People on cover, or characters on covers have died in the past. Looking at Petchka there. And I guess episodes both had dead characters on it, didn't it? Didn't it have Lazaline and Top Speed? Was that who was on episodes? So it's possible that Wedden will die, which is why I'm giving 60% chance of life, 40% chance of death. It's still pretty close to 50-50. I could see Wedden, because she was really thoughtful. She was like, okay, I want to be a magical girl. I'm smart. I know how I want this to play out. And we know she's kind of that smarter character there. She could be Limited's version of Flea, I could think. Even though Flea is kind of here in sort of an indirect way, I could see Wedden being Limited's Flea. Or sadly, which is the reason why it's close to 50-50 and I got 40%, because she's smart and thoughtful and all this, another character was like that and another character died because of it, and that's Detic Bell. She could be Limited's Detic Bell. I could see Wedden figuring out what's going on all behind the scenes, turning on Toko, doing the right thing, and it's still not working out, and she ends up getting killed somewhere along the way. So yeah, that's where I think Wedden is. And then next, my final character that's tied for the biggest chance of dying, Posteri. Posteri, I'm giving a 5% chance of life, 95% chance of death, largest percent chance of dying, and that's because I see Posteri as much more Petchka than Snow White, if you know what I mean. She has that same sort of... She's very similar to both Petchka and Snow White in a lot of ways, but whereas Snow White grew and got strong throughout the novel, and Petchka kind of did that too, but ended up dying, I feel like Posteri's not going to quite grow strong in the way that Snow White did, and I think she's going to die probably not even as heroically as Snow White did. And actually, I think Posteri... Is Posteri on one of the covers? Or no, that's Nanako-san, I think. Not Posteri. So yeah, Posteri, I think that... the Posteri is more Petchka than Snow White, and I think she has a very, very high chance of dying. It's just the way I feel about the character, especially since she's best friends, it would seem, with Rainbow, and if Rainbow is really evil, if Rainbow is really the assassin, then that could be an even bigger way that she's going to be like, I was evil all along, bam, kills Posteri, or Posteri's dying, and she's like, sorry, was evil all along. I think her being friends with Rainbow even adds more on that way that I feel she's gonna die. Well, everyone, sort of bad news. Meanwhile, while recording that discussion, I'm sorry I probably took a really sudden jump cut there. So while recording that, my computer started messing up and lagging and all of that, and my voice was dying really bad anyway. But I was on like the last character or two, and my computer started lagging really bad. It wasn't anything to do with my battery or anything. I forgot I had to split my recording into two because of that. So this is just going to be a cobbled together Frankenstein video, really. So yeah, I'll just jump back in where I believe I would have left off, or where I think I'm going to make this jump cut at, because I think up until Rainbow, everything should be good, and I should be able to leave all that in. I don't think my computer messed up for that stuff. So right before that, just in case, Nozomi Himeno and Wedden, we're both around 50-50. Nozomi Himeno, because I feel like she could be like Limited's Ripple or Limited's Petchka, but I'm leading a little bit more toward death than life. And Wedden's the opposite, where I'm leading a little bit more towards life than death, because I feel like she could be Limited's Fle, or it's Detic Bell, which is why it's close to 50-50. Posteri, only like 5% chance of living. She's probably going to die. She's one of the ones I am most definite about, just because I see her as a very Petchka-like character. Yeah, very Petchka-like character is what I see her as. Rainbow and Toko, I'm given both 40% chance of living and 60% chance of dying individually, like one isn't dependent on the other. But that's kind of a high rate of living for the two of them, but that's not because I think they're not going to lose. The life option, the life percentage is so high for me because I think that they could be imprisoned. One or both of them. One could die, one could be imprisoned, both could die, both could be imprisoned, both could live somehow. There are a lot of options here, but I would say that 40-60, and I'm leaning towards death, but the life is that high because we have learned a lot about magical girls being imprisoned now. And we saw that with Pithy's group. So instead of them going back to being imprisoned, I think we could see somebody new be imprisoned, and I think that's probably Rainbow or Toko, rather than them dying, because they're definitely going to be bad guys and all that. So yeah, I guess that would be it. I'm not going to go back over them, even though a part of me feels like maybe I should. So you know what? I'll go over them with just the death percentage, since from that you can obviously tell what the life percentage is, and I won't give my descriptions. I'll just run through the numbers real quick. I'll try to run through from highest to... No, there's no way I can order that in my head while I'm reading them out loud and not like repeat myself or miss somebody. Sonya B, an 85% chance of death. Pukin, 90% chance of death. Top Pop, 95% chance of death. Pithy Frederica, just 30%. Mana, 90%. Hana, 90%. They are very, very likely to die. Mopom 35%, Nanako-san 50%, could go either way. Ripple 1%. Ripple is like probably not dying. I would be super surprised. Captain Grace 80% chance, May 95% chance, Funny Trick 80% chance, Nozomi Himeno 60% chance of dying. Not too bad. Wedden 40% chance of dying. Wedden's odds are looking pretty okay. Postery 95% chance of dying. Postery's odds are not looking good. Rainbow and Toko both 60% chance of dying. I feel like I might have missed something, but hopefully not. So yeah, and in addition to this discussion, let's discuss some more things. I'm going to screw it. I'm just going to try to flip this page quietly rather than make a jump cut, because I don't feel like adding more into my editing workload. But I wanted to talk about too, because I felt like it was important to my guesses here, and it's something I bring up a lot, and I feel like people are often like, why do you call them, or why do you call, say, Clantail restarts Tama? And it's because when you look at Unmarked, and I think I said a little bit before my death predictions, this is just something I've wanted to discuss personally, so I'm throwing it in here. When you look at the characters from Unmarked and the characters from Restart, a lot of them, even though they're completely different characters, even though their fates may end up differently, a lot of them play the same exact roles in the story. And I think that's really cool, and I think it's cool that it's 16 characters each time, so in the future things can be completely different, but we can still try to guess, okay, who's going to be the Snow White of this, who's going to be the Top Speed of this, who's going to be the Swim of this. So let's talk about a bit of who I kind of consider alike in the stories, and I probably could have done this like a one-to-one comparison, but there are some that's like, you could argue either way, and as I was taking notes, they got a little bit sloppy and messy. But either way, I'll start trying to describe this as best I can, some of my thoughts. The most obvious one that I would use as my supporting evidence here is Clantail and Tama. Though their fates ended up differently, a lot of this is the reason I feel like Tama should have survived. We had the character that was a strong fighting antagonist character, and then we had another character who was the real endgame antagonist, and another behind-the-scenes kind of endgame antagonist. But the strong fighting antagonist got taken out by a good guy character that was allies with some other characters that were maybe some good, maybe some bad. And that allied character kind of had a similar role throughout the two stories, and that was Clantail and Tama. And the only difference is that Tama died after she killed the fighting antagonist, whereas Clantail got to survive, thankfully. So happy for that. Daisy and Nemedine obviously served the same purpose. Daisy was introduced to get us to like her, to get us to say, oh, this is a classical magical girl, and then killed off first to say, okay, no characters are safe, your joy and happiness are gone, we killed off this really good, nice character. Nemedine was the same back in Unmarked. She was introduced, she was a really nice, mature, kind, caring character, and she was killed off first to be like, haha, you can't have nice things, and this is a dark story, screw you, Snow White is gonna suffer, and in the light novels more Ripple, because we focus more on Ripple than Snow White there. But yeah, next up would be Snow White. I feel like Shadowgale was mainly the Snow White of Restart. She was a very important main character. We saw from her perspective a whole hell of a lot. And she made it and survived to be one of the two main ones at the end. So I kind of feel like that, but I feel like Petchka was meant to be Snow White a lot in the way of, when it came to the killing game, Snow White's development and Shadowgale's development are very, very similar. And again, Snow White having to rely on people and trust people for certain things the way that Shadowgale did. Their development in the story of the survival game is very similar. But when it comes to their personal and personality development, Snow White's is very similar to Petchka's, I feel. But Petchka, even though she got that sort of Snow White personality build up, she got to have the hero's death that, remember back when I was covering Unmarked, the anime, because by the time I read the light novels, I had already seen the anime. I was guessing that when I was doing my death predictions for Unmarked, I was saying that Snow White I could totally see dying the hero's death. I could totally see her not making it. So I feel like Petchka was written that way but got the hero's death. So while Shadowgale is more like the Snow White of the series, Petchka kind of fits some of the development of her personality. Now, Flea is definitely the Ripple of the series when it comes to her part in the survival game, what they did during the survival game, the sort of pieces they moved and the place they fit compared to other characters. But I feel like personality, not really personality-wise, but I feel like Flo was also very similar to Ruler. Again, maybe this is just me thinking she's more similar to Ruler in character than really the place where she was in the story. But Flea and Ripple, I think, are very similar in their place in the story. It's just hard to try to explain that connection a lot, because while I feel like they had similar places in the story, there's nothing like super obvious like Clantail and Tama. And there's like very little about them personality-wise, character design-wise that makes them similar. They're just similar in their slot, in their role. Now, Rionetta and Magicaloid, both very obviously similar characters. Both of them kind of had that abrasive personality a little bit, though Magicaloid was a bit of a flatterer. I guess Rionetta was toward Petchka as well. But Rionetta and Magicaloid were both these characters who weren't necessarily bad people, but they went along with a bad person's plan because they needed money or were well, not even really greedy. They just needed money and viewed money very highly. And they just generally played about the same part in the story. Magicaloid and Rionetta. The only difference is that Rionetta got to live a little bit, again, their fate being different. Rionetta got to live a little bit longer and sort of try to have a redemption, was the only difference. Now, Weiss Winter Prison and Yumenishima Genocycle were very similar to... Yumenishima Genocycle wasn't as much of a fighter, but as their role in the story, they were meant to be a likable character. Weiss likable because of her romance and because she was strong. Genocycle likable because she's an otaku like us readers, and she's into video game speak and all that. And they're meant to be characters we like that get killed off and send their best friend down a dark path. Nyan Nyan on the path to trying to get revenge and find out who killed her and stuff. And it leads Nyan Nyan to being obsessive, and Sister Nana into being obsessive and committing suicide. So that also puts Nyan Nyan and Sister Nana in a similar place in the story. They were there to have that deep connection to one character, not so much with other characters, and end up getting killed one way or the other, but in different circumstances. So they're in similar places. They were the ones to be affected by those deaths. Swim Swim and Noko-chan. I mentioned before how we had, and we kind of have the early game fighting antagonist that doesn't mean that much, the later mid-game fighting antagonist that means a lot more, which was Clamberry compared to Melville. And I don't think I've actually gotten to them yet, but yeah, it was Clamberry compared to Melville. Then we had the antagonist that was the big end game antagonist, and then the behind-the-scenes puppet master antagonist. So these two were the endgame antagonists. Swim Swim had a lot of differences from Noko-chan, but they both facilitated, well, I don't know, Noko-chan, with her manipulation, led to most of the deaths. Even though none of them were her fault, all the deaths were Keek's fault in Restart. But the point is, if you're viewing the game as real life or whatever, most of the deaths came because of Noko-chan's involvement, and most of the deaths came because of Swim Swim's direct involvement in Unmarked. And they're both the character that, in order to end the survival game, has to be taken out at the end. And the two characters at the end, 3 in the case of Restart, take out the big final antagonist, which was Noko-chan and was Swim Swim, and that's how all of that ended. Then next up, again, Melville and Clamberry. They were the sort of mid to late game fighting antagonists that were taken down by Clantail and Tama respectively. So Melville and Clamberry, even their appearance and so much more was very much was very much the same. The difference here is that while Clanberry was kind of an indirect antagonist, Melville was more of a direct antagonist toward the end, but a little bit indirect earlier on. And I would say that the good sides of Clanberry, I could compare Clanberry to Lapis Lazuli a lot, because they were both a character who excelled in fighting, who actually killed some of the bad guys, or took part in fighting / killing some of the bad guys. We even see Lazaline fighting Melville and Clanberry fighting Swim Swim. So I would say that Lazaline and Clanberry are somewhat similar too. Again, with characters not always being a direct one-to-one comparison. Then I would next say Masked Wonder is definitely Lapicel / Topspeed. I would say both of them, really. Both of them were characters that were supposed to be liked, that were supposed to be kind of almost an influence, or like a positive influence, like a mentor for the main characters who survive, and then they get killed off really early on. And Topspeed wasn't killed super early on, but I mean, in the grand scheme of 16 characters, I guess she was kind of earlier-ish. So yeah, Lapicella and Topspeed, 2 characters, served similar roles, got killed off in order to progress Snow White and Ripple. Masked Wonder, again, got killed off pretty early to progress Flea and Shadowgale. And because Flea and Shadowgale were together all the time, Masked Wonder was kind of a combined character serving the same role for both of them. Then I mentioned... next up is the early game fighting antagonist, which was that can't be reasoned with, which was Calamity Mary and Akane. They both just wanted to, they had their different reasons for it, but if you look in the basic story, they were both just out there to fight and kill magical girls, and they were pretty good fighters, but they ended up getting taken out early on. They were like an early game antagonist for everybody to go against. So Calamity Mary and Akane, very, very similar. I think that's another one of those more obvious ones. Next, another kind of obvious-ish one is, I would say, Cherna and the Peaky Angels. They were villains, kind of. They were antagonists, kind of, but they were more annoying antagonists than evil antagonists. Except for the one Peaky Angel that goes from annoying to more evil. So yeah, they were the kind of annoying antagonists, and they were both very gimmicky characters. Where I brought up, I think May is kind of a very gimmicky character for Limited. Cherna and Peaky Angels were the gimmick characters for Unmarked and Restart. Then next up is, I would say, Detic Bell and Hardcore Alice. Detic Bell was a character we saw from their perspective a lot. They were really easy to love, and then they get killed off tragically. Detic Bell and Alice both have those things in common. Their deaths were important for progress of important characters. They were important in moving the plot along a lot and finding out a lot about the darkness behind the survival game and the secrets of the arc. So Alice and Detic have a lot of very, very similar things. And I would say that I kind of compared Petchka with Snow White earlier when it comes to some of the personality development, but a lot of the story development, I would say Petchka is similar to Alice as well, where we see them grow a lot along the course of the story, and they die a kind of heroic death passing something on, where Alice sort of passes on this will to Snow White, but with Petchka she kind of passes it on to Clantail, who gets to survive. So Petchka and Alice kind of have a similar role in a way as well, even though Alice is super similar to Detic too. And I would say that lastly, there is kind of another one that works in that way, where Detic and Topspeed are kind of similar, where you can argue that Detic did for the plot and place in the plot what needed, or she did that for Lapis Lazuli, what Topspeed did for Ripple. The only difference is that Ripple got to survive and Lapis Lazuli didn't. So yeah, that was just a discussion I wanted to have on some character similarities between Unmarked Restart. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of similarities, once we're finished with Limited, we can draw between Limited and those characters to see if there's kind of a role in each one. Like the gimmick character, or like the first one who dies because they make us love them character. So yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the read-through portion. I hope you enjoyed the death predictions portion. And I hope you enjoyed the discussion portion. I have no idea what to title this. So yeah, enjoy this Franken-video. That's it, I guess. Like, if you did like the video, comment down there. Tell me what you thought of this chapter and all this discussion, my thoughts on it and all that. Like, comment, subscribe for more Magical Girl Raising Project, much more on the channel. Follow on Twitter if you want. I can try to keep you updated there and stuff for the channel. If you want a link to the Discord server, just ask and I'll give you a link. That's it. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.